Coming up on Arirang News, torrential rains flood many parts of South Korea, including the capital, Seoul. Potentially more than a dozen lives have been lost, and the rain is showing no sign of stopping. Time is almost up for a Japanese company ordered to compensate the Koreans it subjected to forced labor during World War II. The South Korean court will likely soon have the power to seize its local assets. And instead of an outright ban, U.S. President Donald Trump says the owners of the popular app TikTok have 45 days to reach a deal to sell the app to Microsoft. The U.S. sees the Chinese ownership as a national security risk. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Torrential rain in central South Korea, including the capital Seoul, has caused flooding and landslides, claiming lives and damaging property. At a factory in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province, 3 workers were killed Monday and 1 was injured in a landslide. In Seoul, a sinkhole has formed on a road in Gangnam-gu district. A number of homes in the capital area have reported flooding, and in most districts of Seoul, people are not allowed on riverbanks. So far, 6 deaths have been confirmed, while 9 others are unaccounted for. And the Han River, which cuts through the middle of the capital, has risen dramatically because of the rain, forcing the closure of many roads and low-lying bridges. Right now, our Kim Sung-min is at the Jamsu Bridge, which is one of those low-lying areas. Sung-min, how's it looking there?
Devin, the water on the Han River has continued to rise throughout the day, and as you can see behind me, it's now 8 meters higher than usual. If it reaches 5.5 meters, then people are not allowed to walk across the bridge, and if it's over 6.2 meters, then no cars are allowed. The use of this bridge has been restricted since Sunday at 6 p.m., now almost 24 hours ago. In other parts of Seoul, the Dongbu Expressway and some parts of the Olympic Bridge have also been closed. The interchange roads in Banpo and Jamwon, Shinjamwon and Oksu are closed as well. And just south of the capital region, Chungcheongbuk-do Province saw landslides and flooding overnight, and still seeing heavy rain in some regions, almost 30 to 80 millimeters per hour. Gangwon-do Province has also seen over 300 millimeters of rain for each of the past 3 days, and that's expected to continue until tomorrow. The province has issued a landslide warning at the level of caution, which is the second highest level. These areas in Seoul are expected to see heavy rain for the rest of the day, up to around 100 millimeters per hour. That amount of rain makes it hard to see and can flood normally safe urban areas, so take extra caution when going outdoors. There's more rain to come, so be sure to watch for the latest updates. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Kim Sung-min, thank you for that, and do stay safe out there. Now, South Korean President Moon Jae-in has called off his scheduled summer vacation to deal with the damage caused by the rain. That's according to the Blue House, which says Moon was going to spend a week at his private home in Gyeongsangnam-do Province. As for everyone else possibly looking at a vacation, Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun has advised people against working outside or traveling, urging everyone to monitor the weather advisories. In other news, COVID-19 test kits made by the South Korean biotechnology company Macrogen have been approved for use in the EU. The company said Monday that the kits were approved by the European Medicines Agency, and it plans to supply them to government agencies and to European hospitals and clinics. The tests are able to determine whether someone has been infected in under 2 hours. Macrogen is also waiting for approval from the U.S. FDA for emergency use. In a matter of hours, a deadline will pass that'll enable a South Korean court to enforce an order to seize the local assets of Japan's Nippon Steel Corporation. The proceeds would be used to compensate people forced to work for the company when Korea was under Japanese colonial rule during World War II. If the company still has not responded to notice of the ruling by midnight Tuesday, the Pohang branch of the Daegu District Court can move to liquidate the assets. In 2018, Nippon Steel was ordered by South Korea's Supreme Court to compensate 4 victims of forced labor by paying them $84,000 each. That ruling prompted Japan to retaliate against South Korea by restricting the export of key materials. High-ranking Japanese officials have warned of serious consequences if the seizure is carried out. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday. And for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for making time today.
Happy to be here.
Well, U.S. stocks ended last week a fair bit higher, despite the holdup in talks on the new stimulus bill, a big boost from earnings of the major tech firms. Now, Korean shares a little higher today, too. What's the story in the global markets and here in Korea?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, the U.S. markets ended up a bit on an upside. There were some good news, but it was mostly not so good news. So there does seem to be some degree of separation between the real economy and the stock market. But if we had to find some reasons why the markets were so optimistic, well, the Fed had the FOMC meeting last week, and it did confirm that Fed will maintain the low interest rate for the foreseeable future and will continue to purchase corporate bonds at least until the end of the year. And as you mentioned, while the Congress could not agree on a stimulus program and extension of unemployment insurance, I think it's a given fact that it will happen probably sooner than later. And for the second quarter corporate earnings report, about 63% of S&P 500 firms have published reports. They're bad, but not as bad as expected. So earnings were down 35.7% compared to last year's second quarter. That's the worst earnings fall since fourth quarter of 2008. But 84% of reporting firms actually beat the analyst expectations. And the difference between the amount earnings, difference in earnings between expectations and reality turns out to be about 21.8%. So things are bad, but not as bad as they thought. And that seems to be feeding into the optimism of the U.S. market. Now, the European markets have been falling rapidly since Wednesday because in some European countries, the coronavirus seems to be coming back. The Asian markets were mixed for most of last week, and it's mixed today. Shanghai rose most of last week, and it's rising today. Hong Kong Hang Seng, it fell most of last week and is falling today as well. That's probably because they're having a rise in coronavirus cases. Nikkei, it fell rapidly last week, but it recovered quickly today. And the analysts are attributing that to individual investors picking up cheap stocks. And then Korea, the Kospi mostly rose last week, and it rose very slightly today. The individuals bought stock. Like Japan, they seem to be picking up cheap stocks because foreigners sold off a lot of Korean stocks last week. But on the other hand, Kosdaq, perhaps because the tech stocks are doing well in the United States and elsewhere, it rose most of last week, and it rose by 1.5% today. Individuals, in this case, sold the stocks, and the institutions and foreigners bought the stocks on the Kosdaq market.
Well, Professor, a big story in the past few days is the damage the pandemic has done to major economies around the world. Korea's economy did contract in the second quarter, just like most others, but by the second smallest amount among these developed countries in the OECD. What do you make of that, Professor, and what's your outlook?
Okay, well, the only major country which scored positive growth was China. They scored 11.5% growth, and that's partially because they had such a bad first quarter because they were in a shutdown for most of the first quarter. Now, the other major OECD countries like Germany, U.S., France. Germany had minus 10% growth rate. U.S. had minus 9.5%. France had almost minus 14% negative growth rates. Korea only had negative 3.3. But we should remember that for the United States and Europe, part of this fall was deliberately chosen result of policy. The government forced the shutdown on the supply side and lockdown on the demand side, so that was bound to lower the growth rates. That was, as a lot of economists said, induced coma. And it was necessary to cut down the coronavirus. For the European countries, it seemed to have worked. Their coronavirus cases have gone down significantly, and they're looking at optimistic third quarter. United States, not so much, because they couldn't stand the lockdown and shutdown. They seem to have gone out of it prematurely, and now they're looking at a pessimistic third quarter. On the other hand, Korea. Because Korea depends on exports for about 40 to 45% of the GDP, unlike even China, where only about 20 to 25% of their GDP is concerned with exports. We really need both China and United States to recover if Korea is going to have a recovery. Now, China does seem to be on a solid footing to have a recovery. So if you look at the July export figures, Korean exports, China went up. Korean exports to the United States went up as well. But as I mentioned, United States is looking a bit more pessimistic for the third quarter. I think the United States, whether they're going to have a recovery or not, is the big wild card here. If the United States does succeed in recovering in the third quarter, global economy, well as Korea, will have a fairly good third quarter. But if United States goes back into a serious recession, then it'll be very difficult for Korea to have a good third quarter.
All right, we've got about a minute left, Professor. It's the start of a new week. What's coming up in the days ahead?
Okay, well, the big news is the Korea government's housing supply policy. It was supposed to be announced last week, but they delayed it to this week. That's going to be sort of the big giant news that's going to come out this week, hopefully, unless they delay it again. And then there's the Korean Consumer Price Index and inflation numbers, which are supposed to come out, and the current account and capital account numbers from the Bank of Korea, which will be interesting as well. On the United States side, as I mentioned, the July numbers will give us some indications whether they're going to be back in a recession or going to a recovery. The U.S. July employment and wages figures should be out this Friday, and U.S. Purchasing Managers Index will also be available this week.
Got it. All right, Professor, thanks so much for your insights today, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
U.S. President Donald Trump has given the owners of the smartphone app TikTok 45 days to negotiate the sale of the app to Microsoft. Trump had threatened to simply ban the app outright. Our Choi Jung-yoon has the details.
Citing two people familiar with the matter, Reuters reported on Sunday local time that President Donald Trump has given Chinese ByteDance, the parent company of popular short video application TikTok, 45 days to negotiate the sale of the app to Microsoft, practically giving approval of the merger. Such a comment goes somewhat against from what Trump's previous claims that TikTok under its current Beijing-based parent company poses a national risk.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok. We may be doing some other things. There are a couple of options, but a lot of things are happening, so we'll see what happens.
But following a discussion between Trump and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, the U.S. tech company said it intends to acquire TikTok from ByteDance by September 15th. Microsoft said it would ensure all private data of TikTok's American users is transferred to and remains in the United States, mentioning it understands Trump's concerns. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which reviews the national security implications of foreign business deals, will monitor the negotiations and has the power to block the deal. ByteDance, on the other hand, has suggested it might be considering legal countermeasures to the U.S. action. In its statement on Sunday night, ByteDance said it will actively protect its lawful rights and interests using all powers given by the U.S. legislation if TikTok is banned or if the merger with Microsoft is blocked. The reason for the sudden change in Trump's stance is yet uncertain. Before media outlets explained he was aware of young voters in America. The app has 100 million users in the U.S., and NBC predicted that if Trump bans the app, it could motivate young TikTok users to vote against the president in the November election. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
New figures suggest that to buy an average-priced apartment in Seoul, a household with an average income in the city would have to save all their income for more than 12 years. According to the National Assembly Research Service, the price-to-income ratio for the city last year, measuring the affordability of homes, came to 12.13. As of last December, the average price of an apartment was just under $700,000 US. To cool the overheated housing market, the government is set to reveal plans soon to build more housing units in and around Seoul. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.